They plaster on that same fake smile, and you play along a little while. Come dance with the freaks and the gypsies, and drink till we're love drunk and tipsy. We're never looking back, we rise up from the ash, above the smoke they cast. Running with the outcasts. Running with the outcasts. Running with the outcasts.
Hello guys, so our next Halloween video is inspired by Pinhead from the Hellraiser series. This one has been on my list for quite a while now, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys, so I hope you enjoy it. This was all on my first run at this, so there are a lot of things I would do differently, and I learned a ton, so I hope you will too. We're gonna go over the nails, bald cap, makeup, and costume, plus all the mishaps as per usual. It's gonna be a long one, so get comfortable and let's get into it. We're starting out with the nails or pins. Now, I did not come up with this idea. I found it on YouTube a while ago, so I'll link that for you guys if you want to check it out. I'm using plastic Q-tips and I've cut off the ends so we just have the plastic stick. This way the nails will be super light so they'll hold their place better and not droop, and they'll be safer as well if you want to wear this out. You're also going to need a glass plate, a lighter, and a well-ventilated space. I also wore a respirator mask while doing this as a little extra safety precaution. To flatten the ends, I'm using the lighter and moving it in and out at just the very end of the stick as I rotate it for about 3 seconds, definitely no more than 5. When you're heating it up, you can see the end has already started flattening itself out, but I'm gently tapping the end on the glass plate before it cools back down and hardens, trying my best to create a straight and flat little head. You're going to do this on both ends. One end will be the actual head of the nail and the other will be the base that anchors it into the bald cap and adheres to your face. You can see here there are small holes in each end because these are like tiny tubes, but we're going to fill one of those up later. On a couple, I did try to kind of twist it as I flattened on the plate to close up the hole, but I found that for me at least that didn't work well, but feel free to experiment with that for yourself. We just want to heat up the plastic so it's soft and malleable. We don't want to actually melt or set it on fire and burn it. Just, as always, be cautious and get help if you need it. There's definitely a sweet spot when heating these up. If you don't heat it up enough, the head of the nail will be a bit small, and if you end up heating the plastic for too long and it becomes too soft and more melted, the head will end up bigger most likely, and when you press it onto the plate, it's harder to get straight and even, and can also stick to the plate while it's still hot and warp the end a bit, or just completely get messed up like this one here. They don't all need to be perfect or look exactly the same, but the main thing we want to try and do is make sure at least one of the heads is nice and flat on each. Some of mine ended up being at more of an angle, and if you look closely at the final makeup, you can see they're not all sticking straight out, and that's the reason why. So you're gonna do that about roughly 300 more times and you'll be set. In the final product, I used about 130 of these and was actually short and had to modify my design a little. So I'd say just to make a lot more than you think you'll need, especially because some of them most likely just aren't going to turn out. I did this part very first, but ideally you could wait until after you've lined your bald cap and made your design so you know exactly how many of these you're gonna need. Once they're all flattened out, I set them all up in a piece of shipping foam that I just had lying around. And I guess I didn't actually film any of the painting process, but I used a metallic silver spray paint that is meant for plastic. I sprayed the top half, then once dry, I pushed them out the other end of the foam and turned it over and sprayed the other ends. I want to note that using the foam wasn't the greatest idea because the spray paint stuck to the foam as it dried and peeled up a bit on some. We're going to completely prep and pre-paint the bald cap, so when it comes time for makeup, we pretty much just have to put it on. I used a plastic bald cap, but you can also use a latex one if that's what you're able to get. I'm first trimming it a bit so I'm able to put it on. I've put my hair in a fairly slicked back low ponytail, and I'm trying the cap on so I can mark where I actually want to cut it to fit my face. Sorry about the crazy lighting during this bit. I was attempting to film in natural light on a windy and cloudy day. Smart. I'm then carefully cutting a slit up the center of where my ears hit, and I'm also trying not to cut too far back just in case I end up tearing it at all. And here I probably should have just fully traced the outline of my ears and then cut because it ended up fitting weird and I had some wrinkles around the tops. I'm taking the bald cap over the brows, then tracing where I want it to fit using a brown eyeliner. If you're using a latex bald cap, you may not want to do this since it is pretty close to the eyes. I decided to go with a plastic bald cap because you can blend the edges into the skin using acetone. So that combined with fitting it over the brows just helped to give it a more seamless look overall. Then I just cut along the line I made and put it back on to make sure it was all good. Now I'm using the same brown eyeliner to start marking the lines at the front of the bald cap, starting at the center and using a photo of Pinhead for reference. This looks a little ridiculous, but I'm using a soft tape measure to get these marks pretty even, about 1 inch apart. If you're using a latex bald cap or just wanted to end your cap up higher on the forehead, you could start by marking these lines on your skin leading up onto where your bald cap starts, so you can still create this guide for yourself. I'm doing my best to line straight up from the marks I made using that center line as a guide, then realized I needed to line out further, so again used my tape measure to mark every 1 inch, not quite all the way out to the ears. And those lines are going to start curving out a bit around the sides of the head. These side pieces you could trim, but I'm just leaving them because I wasn't sure how much I wanted to keep. Once all those base lines across are marked, we can take the bald cap off and line the rest on either a styrofoam or redhead. I'm lining the tape measure up from the center line to the top of the head, marking it with the same eyeliner and connecting that line down to the front, then lining it down the back using this photo for reference, taking it down so it's about lined up with the top of the ears. Then I'm lining the tape measure perpendicular to the center line and marking out again about every inch, 4 marks on each side of the line. Then it's just a matter of connecting the marks to the lines in the front. They don't need to be totally perfect, but if you get way off or decide you want to change your design, you can use a little bit of makeup remover on a Q-tip and then reline once it's dry. You'll see me doing this quite a bit here. Now I'm again working perpendicular to the lines I just drew, marking every inch going up to the top of the head. I decided to go up the center line and mark those inches first, then work my way out with the lines, again using the makeup remover on a Q-tip to fix any mess ups. The lines going in this direction aren't all going to be quite every inch. You'll start with them at 1 inch apart at the front and center, but since the outside lines going around the ears will be much shorter than the center line, you'll need to adjust them so they all fit. But a side note, I did end up erasing every other line on that outside column because they were pretty close together and I felt like that would have just looked too crowded with all the nails in there. And then on the back portion, I just skipped every other line. So now we're going to do the same thing on the back half of the head. I did the front first, so I had more of an idea of what the heck I was doing, but you could do this all to begin with if you want to. I'm starting by lining across the bottom, just eyeballing it, so we have a stopping point, and then creating all the lines going straight back. Again, eyeballing it and using the center line as a guide. The 2 outside lines I did more at the same time so I could try to keep them at least pretty evenly spaced. You may need to extend your bottom line a bit if you didn't take it out far enough. Once I knew what I was doing more, I started by lining across the 2 center pieces and then took the lines out from there, skipping every other one onto that last column. Also, you'll want to use a semi-soft pencil for all these lines so they glide on pretty smooth. If the pencil is too hard, it could also end up tearing the bald cap, which we definitely do not want. I'm not skipping the outer column on the bottom 2 rows since the curve has straightened out and now we have more room to work with. And with that, the outlining is complete. Now we get to start painting it, and I'm going to be using a white PAX paint that I mixed up using Aide and a plain white acrylic paint at a 1:1 ratio, so equal parts of each. I made this little batch previously, so I'm giving it a little stir using a popsicle stick. I'm going to be painting the entire bald cap with this using good old disposable makeup sponges from the drugstore. I'll be stippling on a few layers so it's nice and opaque, and I don't know why, but I started applying on the back of the head first. I don't know that it super matters where you apply it when. It makes more sense to work from front to back, but in any case, just make sure you blend out any edges before it starts drying so you don't get any weird lines, and do your best to apply it evenly. You can also buy already made PAX paints at, I know, Nigel's or Friends or FX Warehouse online if you want to do that, which would most likely be better, but I figured I have Aide and white acrylic paint already. If I were applying this to my skin, I definitely would have ordered some already made, but since we're not actually applying this to our skin, I wasn't too worried about it. I decided to use PAX paint for a couple reasons. It helps to seal the bald cap so the alcohol doesn't break it down so much. And I also just didn't want to fuss with water activated or cream paint because this is going to be handled and messed with a lot before we actually put it on. After I was pretty happy with the coverage and had everything except for the very edges done around the sides and bottom, I set everything really well with a colorless powder to get rid of the stickiness and shine. I'm being very generous with the powder and holding my powder lid below to at least catch some of the extra. I then decided to switch to a styrofoam head because this one I think I got at Hobby Lobby is just slightly wider and bigger than the red head, so the bald cap had a tighter fit. I was also able to use some sewing pins to anchor down those little flappy pieces in places that wouldn't much matter, close to the side edges and then where the nails will go into on the sideburn areas. I wasn't sure how this would go, but I applied another layer of the white PAX over top of the powdered PAX, which ended up being fine. Just wanted to even out the application a bit. While we wait for that to dry, I'm going to show you how I filled the little holes at the end of the nails. So this is what they look like after spray painting, and you'll just need to choose which end will be the top so you can fill that one. I'm using Model Magic to fill in the end, which is a very light air-dry clay. Just taking a little bit and putting it into the hole, then pressing and smoothing over it with my thumb so the clay breaks and you just have a bit left stuck inside. Then you're just going to press it down to make sure it's smooth and flat, then set it aside until you're ready to paint it. You don't have to use a little worm for this. It actually ended up working better just using a little ball or blob of clay. You'll just want to make sure to use a small amount at a time so it doesn't start drying out before you get to use it. Sorry this bit is out of focus, but to paint it, I'm using a metallic silver acrylic paint similar to the spray paint color, and just using a small flat paintbrush to apply that over the entire end. Then I'm turning it upside down, picking up a little more paint on my brush, then I'm going to brush downward right above and onto the head of the nail as I slowly turn it to fill in any gaps and just give it a smoother look. Then I'm brushing that up lightly onto the nail to blend the color since it is just slightly darker than the spray paint. Here is the unfilled end compared to the filled in end. And now we just need to set this layer of PAX with the colorless powder, then we can get to some detailing. I went ahead and did half off camera to figure out what I wanted to do, and I decided I didn't want to take it down this far in the back, so I left the bottom row as it was and painted more white PAX over it later to cover the outlines better. For the detailing, I'm using the Skin Illustrator FX palette, which is an alcohol activated paint palette, so you need 99% alcohol to use these. The alcohol I have is from Nigel's, and it is very affordable, and I used the shade Aged Blood for all the initial lining and detailing, which was the perfect shade, just what I wanted, and then black to darken. I wanted to use alcohol activated paints as opposed to water activated or cream products on the bald cap, especially because again, we're going to be handling this a lot and we don't want to worry about smudging or rubbing the color everywhere as we work. They do sell Skin Illustrator singles if it's not in your budget to get a full palette because they are quite pricey. The singles are about $15 each and they have every color listed, at least on the PPI website, so I will link that below for you guys. Basically, I'm painting this Aged Blood color over all the outlines we drew on earlier with the eyeliner. And I'm using a super small detail paintbrush to do this. Depending on how much alcohol you mix in with the paint, you can really play around with the opacity, similar to water-activated paints, but for the most part I want to create fairly opaque lines to begin with. I experimented a little bit with more detailing, like rounding out the corners, smearing and tapping the paint before it dried, creating a kind of spattered effect just by stippling that detail brush near the corners and along the edges of the lines, and adding more alcohol to thin out or lighten some areas. Once I had it all applied, I decided to go in and darken the side I'd done first, and then I did the rest of the detailing off camera, but it'll be the same process as we do on the face. Now we're going to secure the nails into the bald cap, and these are the two I've done already. We'll be putting these in before darkening our lines with the black paint. I was originally going to use Prose to adhere them and then seal and anchor the bottom in with liquid latex, but that would have been an extra step, and after experimenting with it, the latex held them in place just fine. All you're going to need is a sewing pin. I'm using a ballpoint. We'll be putting each nail in individually, and all we're going to do is push the pin through all the intersecting points. I'm moving the pin around a little bit just to make the hole a tiny bit bigger and so we can see it a bit better. And of course, be careful not to poke yourself. Then we take the nail and make sure you're putting the right end into the bald cap, the one that you did not fill. And we're going to hold the bald cap a bit taut and just ease that in very gently, starting at an angle so we don't rip the hole bigger than we want it. It may also be easier to turn the bald cap inside out as you're pushing it through so you can see what's going on and make sure it's actually going through the hole. It may take a little time, but don't rush it or you're more likely to rip the bald cap. Try not to pull at the bald cap too hard either so it doesn't warp. I think the layers of PAX Paint really helped in this aspect as well though, so the holes would stretch out to get the head of the nail in and then go back to its original size once it was through. Now we're going in with the latex to seal and anchor it in place on the inside of the bald cap. I'm using a Q-tip to apply a small amount of latex around the base of the head of the nail and onto the very bottom of it, then simply pulling the nail from the outside until it's snug against the bald cap. Then I'm using the Q-tip to smooth out the latex onto the cap, adding more if you feel it's necessary, which I did as I went along because I felt like it gave a better hold to have a bit more latex at the base. You'll then need to wait for the latex to dry and then powder it to get rid of the tackiness so it won't stick to itself. When you're doing it, I would recommend putting several in or even all of them in and then sealing them in with the latex in small sections since you need to wait for the latex to dry and it's a bit hard to hold everything in place, especially when you start getting more and more nails in. A hairdryer would also be helpful to speed up the drying process. For the purpose of showing how to do it, I'm just doing a single nail since that's easier to work with. So here we have the finished bald cap, so satisfying to see it finally come together, and now it's time to get into the actual makeup portion. The first thing we need to do is slick our hair back to prep it for the bald cap, and I'm just using water and a fine tooth comb to do that, pulling the hair into a super low ponytail, as low as I could possibly get it, and I'm tucking that down into the turtleneck of my top as well. Also, the real number one here, if your costume top is a pullover and not a zip or button closure, you'll have to wear it during the entire makeup process since obviously it can't be pulled over the pinhead. which I did not think about until like the day before filming this, and let me just say, this top is not ideal to wear under studio lighting, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And now the time has finally come to put this baby on. I did still block my brows a little bit just to flatten them and get rid of most of the texture. I'm lining the bald cap up and placing the very front down first and then gently pulling it back onto my head. I'm pretty much just going to speed through this and link you guys to Goldie Starling's video on how to put on a bald cap, because she knows what she's doing. I'm pretty much a noob at this. This is actually my first time using a plastic bald cap. So yeah, I'm gonna link her video for you guys so you can actually gain some useful knowledge, but I'll mention a few things as I go here. I carefully push the front of the bald cap up, and I'm using Aide to adhere the bald cap to the skin, letting it dry before sticking the bald cap down. And I started with the front brow section first so I could line everything up from there. I'm relaxing my eyes and brows when I stick down the sideburn areas, so then if I do raise my brows, it won't create any wrinkling in the bald cap. The ears and behind the ears for me were the hardest, and I definitely got Aide in my hair, which isn't the worst thing that could happen. In the end, I used the Aide remover to help get it out. If you have someone to help you with the side and back parts, that would be very helpful, but you can definitely do it by yourself. When I adhered down along the sides, I made sure to fold down my turtleneck top and pulled my hair back up at this point so I could control it better. I didn't trim the sides, just decided to apply it how I wanted it and then use the acetone to dissolve and cut it. I applied the adhesive down the side of my neck and a little around to the bottom where I wanted it, then pulled from both sides a bit to stretch it and stuck it down once dry. I took the ponytail out before adhering the second side down so I could get rid of that big bump at the top of the neck. And since I'm just letting the hair fall down my back, I'm not adhering the bottom of the cap down, so there will be some wrinkling on the neck. For this costume, it's not too bad since Pinhead has a turtleneck, and you could even wear a higher one than I am if you can find or make one. Then I'm using acetone on a Q-tip to roll and blend away the edges of the bald cap, being super careful when working close to the eyes since it can irritate them and is drying to the skin. Kind of closing my eyes a little bit and using a very small amount of acetone at a time so we don't risk it dripping down. Just be sure to cleanse and moisturize well after removal. You'll also want to be careful around the brow area so you don't remove any of your brow block. Once the bald cap is secure, apparently I was going to powder along the edges, but for whatever reason decided not to. You just want to do that to get rid of any stickiness. I'm now applying a white cream makeup to my entire face and onto my ears, and I decided to wait on the neck so it didn't get all over my turtleneck. I'm using a fluffy brush to apply this because I couldn't find my beauty blender at the time, but later I did find it, so I kind of switched back and forth between the two, using a smaller brush to apply to tighter areas like around the eyes, ears, and right up along the edge of the bald cap, applying a nice even opaque layer all over. And now I'm going in with my powder very generously to set the cream makeup in place, starting with the eyelids to prevent any crazy creasing. And do your best not to inhale too much powder like I definitely did this time. With the white base done, I'm taking a dark, cool brown eyeshadow on a small detail brush. This one happens to be angled, it doesn't have to be. I'm outlining my line design as we did on the bald cap, starting from the center and then lining around my eyes in a curved rectangular shape. Again, using my reference photos as a guide, but fitting it how I think looks best on my face and works with the lines on the bald cap. I did make a quick face chart for this just to get a feel for what it would look like, but I'm also kind of just eyeballing it as I go. I held one of the nails up on my nose to see where I wanted that one placed, then marked that line across. I'm using the lines on the bald cap as a guide, and I'm working each side at the same time to help keep things even and at least pretty symmetrical, although these don't need to be perfect. I knew I had to modify the cheek and jaw design on the outside since I didn't have quite enough nails to cover the entire face. I actually really like how this design came out though, it gave it kind of a little different personality I think. But if you did make enough nails, you could cover your entire face. Now I'm going in with a medium gray eyeshadow and applying that with a tapered blending brush to the lid and into the crease, not being very clean with this. Then started blending it up into the hollow of the eye, kind of up into the brow area. I didn't really know what I was doing at this point. In the end, pretty much all of this is going to end up being covered with black, but it never hurts to start out with a lighter color and work your way up. I then blended onto the upper lid and smudged out from the outer corner of the eye. Honestly, this wasn't too bad. I actually like it more now than I did then, but I decided to go over it with a black eyeshadow on a smaller blending brush, starting with the same areas I applied the gray to, but then also applied onto the outer corners, then decided on the entire lid. Basically just ended up doing a messy black smoky eye thing. So feel free to keep the initial shape or just do the eye makeup however you would like. I started smudging out from the outer corners with the black as well as under the eyes, and then I wasn't sure what I wanted to do at this point, so I contoured my cheeks using the gray eyeshadow, using a dense kind of flat face brush to really chisel out the shape. I applied this under the bottom lip and then used the black eyeshadow to darken the back of the cheek contour, blending onto the ears. I switched back to the eyeshadow blending brush to contour down the sides of the nose a little bit, just with the gray eyeshadow. Then this is when I decided I just wanted black around the entire eye, so I'm applying more black eyeshadow all over, adding in more smudging as I go. Then I curled my lashes and tightlined my eyes with a black pencil liner, applying and smudging up onto the lash line and lid using a dense domed brush. Then setting that in place with a black eyeshadow and just kept adding more until I was satisfied with the level of darkness. Added even more smudging and took that up onto the bald cap above the center of the eyes as well. I blended a little bit of this black over the ears and to the center of the lips, then lined my waterline with the black liner, smudging down along the lash line and under the eye and setting with black eyeshadow just like we did on the top. Buffing out some of the edges with a little bit of white eyeshadow on my brush and then applying a lot of coats of black mascara to my top and bottom lashes. Then I'm applying a dark gray metallic cream lipstick over the eyeshadow on the lips, smudging it out with my fingers and just making it look messy, applying more and keeping it the darkest at the very center. I also blended white eyeshadow around the outside to lighten it a bit. Now I'm going back in with the Aged Blood and black from the Skin Illustrator Effects palette to line all the lines on my face, and here is the alcohol I have from Nigel's. Again, make sure you use 99%. Before I do that, I decided it was time to apply the white cream makeup and powder to the neck, same as we did on the face, and just taking it down a little bit past where my turtleneck starts. I made a total mess with the powder, but I just used a baby wipe to clean up my top, and I also contoured with the gray and black eyeshadows along the jawline and down onto and around the sides of the neck. I also applied some to the temple areas, which I didn't like and didn't really blend out very well either for whatever reason. If you apply it there, you'll want to take it around the back of the head a little bit as well, where you would naturally have shadows, which I didn't do, so that's probably explains why I didn't like it. But you may want to have someone help you with that, or you can use an additional mirror as well. Okay, so now we're lining all the lines with the Aged Blood paint using the same small paintbrush used on the bald cap and adding in random smudges where I feel like needs one. And I will say that these lines ended up quite a bit quicker and messier than the lines on the bald cap. The exhaustion was definitely starting to set in, and I knew I still had to put all the nails on. But I mean, uneven and messy isn't really all that bad for this particular look. I went around and added a little more texture and thickness and rounded out the corners just slightly, and you can also use a little of the straight 99 alcohol to tone or thin it down in areas if needed. Then I darkened the lines with the black alcohol activated paint, trying to focus on going through the center and lining this slightly thinner than the red to create more dimension so they look deeper in the skin. You could use a water activated paint here if you wanted, or a liquid eyeliner as well. We're getting so close to the finish, I can just taste it. Now we can finally adhere all the nails to our face. I've dipped the bottom of the head of the nail first into liquid latex, then let that dry, and then powdered it. So we have a good barrier between our skin and the spray paint on the plastic. To adhere, I've dipped just the very bottom in Aide, let it dry, and then I'm pressing into the skin where I want to apply it. Ideally, you do this on a clean face for it to adhere properly, but there was just no way I was going to attach all of these and then try to apply my white base and eyeshadow and everything through all the nails. These ended up sticking really well though, so just so you know, it did work fine for me. So what I did was adhere the nails with Aide, as I said, and then applied liquid latex around the base of the nail head so it would have an anchor and be more stable. Now, this worked really well, but this is where I ran into some issues as far as the application goes. What I first tried to do, adhere several of the nails, nearly all of them, and then try to apply the liquid latex to all of them one by one, thinking it would be faster. What I should have done, and what I do much later after I realize what a horrendous mistake this was, adhere one, maybe two tops at a time and anchor that one with the latex, let it dry, and then move on to the next one. The plastic is very light, but not so light that it can hold its own and fight gravity for 5 to 10 minutes while you work on anchoring the other nails. You can see pretty much all of them drooping. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know if it was the extremely late hour or what, but man, my brain was just not working very logically at this point. I also should have worked from top to bottom so I didn't have to keep bumping into all the other nails as I was trying to adhere another. Here you can see me trying to work on one and it looks absolutely ridiculous, and there are a few just hanging on by a thread. So now we've talked about all my mistakes, we're going to go ahead and jump forward to after I finish all those ones so I can actually show you what I think I should have done. So I'm using a metal spatula tool to apply the latex. It has a rounded, kind of scoop-like shape on one end, and the other end is flat and more pointed. I adhere the nail to the skin using Aide, letting it dry before putting it on. Then I use my little spatula guy to apply a bit of liquid latex around the very base of the head. And don't mind me just holding this other one in place as it finishes drying. But I first apply the latex, and then while it's wet, blend the edges out into the skin using the rounded end of the tool, trying to blend out onto the lines rather than onto the white base because they'll be easier to hide with the black paint. I applied 2 to 3 layers of latex on some of them that needed more support, and you'll just want to let each layer dry in between. You'll know it's dry when it turns more of a yellowy color. Once all the nails have finally been applied, hallelujah, I'm powdering over the latex to get rid of any shine and tackiness, and then used the aged blood and black alcohol activated paints to darken around the base of all the nails, fading that out into the lines and up onto the nails slightly as well. This is where it got a little messier and really rushed, but I was fighting against sunrise coming and I really wanted it to be at least semi-dark when we went out to get the intro shots, so I didn't get to take as much time on this part as I would have liked to. Then I'm powdering over everything one more time to tone it down just a pinch. I'd already powdered the bald cap detailing, and I'm using a big fanned powder brush to apply carefully among all the nails, and then a smaller fluffy brush to get closer to them. Last but not least, some setting spray to help take a bit of that powdery look away, and I used a baby wipe to again clean the excess powder off my top. The lenses I'm wearing for this are the style Possession from Samhain contact lenses. As you can see here, these guys are stuck on pretty darn well, and while I would consider these plastic nails pretty safe to wear out to a con or a party, there's still a bunch of small things attached to your face and head, and while you probably, hopefully, wouldn't get impaled with these, if you were to run into something or someone or you fall down or anything, you could still hurt yourself, so just be aware of that. As a last minute afterthought, right before we left to shoot, I painted all the skin on my legs, stomach, and hands that would be visible in the costume, just using a white water-activated body paint. Speaking of the costume, the top I ordered from Amazon, the skirt I made using a fabric I ordered from Amazon, plus a piece of a thrifted belt on the waistband. The garter leggings were sent to me from Leg Avenue, and then the amazing shoes were sent to me from AMI Clubwear. They completely made the outfit for me, and they are super comfortable as well. They're not my usual style, but I feel like I need to find a reason to wear these out all the time. But I will have everything linked down below for you guys to check out. We have finally made it to the end of the video, and I've literally started to lose my voice from all these voiceovers. But I really hope you guys enjoyed and that it was helpful for you. Thank you guys so much for watching and for all the love this Halloween season. You are all seriously the sweetest people, so thank you. And I will see you in the next one.